Every week, Hillsdale College President Larry P. Arnn joins Hugh Hewitt to discuss great books, great men, and great ideas. This is the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. Also at the Hillsdale College Podcast Network, check out the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, The Larry P. Arnn Show, and more, all at podcast.hillsdale.edu.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That music means we are in the last radio hour of the week, the Hillsdale Dialogue. All things Hillsdale are at hillsdale.edu, and all of our prior Hillsdale Dialogues are at hughforhillsdale.com. We'll return to Plato next week. This week, though, Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, joins me to talk about events current and pressing. Dr. Arnn, first of all, thank you for joining me. I want to begin by acknowledging that in North Carolina and Tennessee and Virginia and Georgia and South Carolina, they're suffering. And in Florida, we don't even know what's happened there yet after Hurricane Milton. What impact do you think that will have, if any, beyond the destruction of lives, property, and wealth on the election?
I don't know. The one that's nearing Florida is apparently really bad. I mean, hurricanes are very bad when they hit cities. This one's very bad. And so maybe it'll be, Tampa looks like it's in the crosshairs, be shut down for 2 weeks or something, but I hope not. And I don't, in the end, the election is what? It's 25 days away or something like that.
It'll be 20. Maybe 22. Yeah. Let me ask you this. You're from Arkansas, and I think Florida will do better. We'll know Monday, but I think Florida will do better because they have more practice, but the mountains of North Carolina, I don't know that they will because they don't actually ever have anything like this happen to them. Did Arkansas ever have hurricanes?
No. Our thing is like snow is, extremely welcome to young people in Arkansas, and rare enough that missing a school day is just glorious. And in Michigan, that much snow, people don't even talk about it.
I know in Ohio we call that February. That's not a deal.
Right. Yeah, we won't. North Carolina won't be very good at this, I'll bet. And DeSantis, by the way, did really spectacularly. The federal government is a mess, and my belief is it doesn't really work for us anymore, and it'd be better if we could get that back. But FEMA is, controversies about it all over the place, right? But I want to dwell on one. Job.
The fact that Secretary Mayorkas went out in the middle between the two hurricanes and said, we're out of money, FEMA's out of money. I talked to Ron Johnson on Monday. He was stunned by that. They just plussed him up. They just passed a CR. FEMA just got refunded.
Yeah. And it's, just remember, it's not, the attitude is so often wrong. That is to say, I don't have that hard a job, but one part of it is I'm supposed to have college. And so if something disrupts that, that's like job one, how are we going to have college? And they don't seem to think, where's the attitude in Mayorkas or any of them? That's my job. Homeland Security, Federal Emergency Management Authority. Authority, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
And so, they've spent a lot of money relocating illegal aliens.
Yeah, ICE's name is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Enforcement.
Yeah.
That has gone by the water,
yeah, so
by the way.
That's, isn't it true everywhere you look? There's dysfunction. The numbers came out lately about how many third and fourth graders can read in America. And it's just pitiful, right? But the amount of money we spend on education and the fact that half the employees in education are not teachers, that's, terrible, right? And kids by nature can read, just like by nature they can talk. Why can't we teach them to read anymore? What's that about? And
that interesting? I have a good friend whose daughter is a Teach for America Harvard grad, wonderful young lady, just got married. They aspire to be teachers of teachers because teachers of teachers is a good thing to be. But for every teacher of teacher that you have one less teacher who's teaching children.
So we're a college, right? And an ancient original purpose of college in the West was teaching people how to teach. But that means teaching them things that they will teach, because teaching is something that happens in a classroom with a bunch of kids. And it's, and so you got to go in there amongst them and learn how to do it. And, it's not, I could name 4 or 5 people at Hillsdale College who are just spectacular teachers. I won't do it. Maybe more than most of them. But if you're not a good teacher at Hillsdale College, everybody knows it because kids don't want to take their classes. And so the point is, the wisdom about the instruction of a child is chiefly located in the child. And so it's a really great idea to get close to the children if you want to be a teacher.
I'm curious. I have a follow-up for you. I've been teaching con law since 1996, and my reputation is of an excellent but difficult teacher. That means I give hard exams and I require people to memorize. The result of that is I get excellent students. I don't get the grifters. Is that your experience?
Yeah. There's I'm trying to be careful in my position here right now, but who cares? A really great teacher is a man named Justin Jackson here. He teaches our Genesis and Exodus courses and our online courses. You should go watch, right? He's a very hard grader. And there's a cue to get into his classes. And that there is an inverse ratio at Hillsdale College between grading and popularity of teachers. And that's because the kids want to grow and they know they got to work.
There was that same problem, or not a problem, that same result in the 70s with Harvey Mansfield and his classes, because he abandoned, I think, in the last 5 years, his war against grade inflation. But he fought vigorously in the front line of the phalanx for years. And he'd come into the house and he would sit down at the dining room table. I mean, this is 50 years ago. And he would say, I'm not going to change my grading curve. And you can yell at me as much as you want. And we would, and he wouldn't change it. And we'd all say, well, you're stopping people from getting into law school. And he said, no, I'm not. They'll know it's me. It was somewhat arrogant, but also accurate.
This Monday at the Monday meeting, that's a staff meeting we have every Monday in my office. The Associate Vice President for Student Affairs, the great Diane Phillip, one of my questions is always, how are we doing? And she said that this year was unusual. She said, as usual, a lot of kids, because we do freshman interviews through the first term, find out how you're doing, and we're going to have to throw you out of here or what. And they report that they have received their first C on a midterm paper or something. And, the average kid getting in here has a 3.95 from high school. So they never had a C, right? She said this year there was not a single complaint. And I said, well, that means we've braced them pretty hard before they come here, that's what's going to happen. And they've come here for that, you see. They want that. They want to learn, and they accept that will be difficult for them.
It's very interesting to me.
Right.
I remember arguing with a associate, a teaching assistant about a B as a freshman, because I'd never seen a B before except in geometry and physics, which we'll talk about with Professor O'Toole later. But he just said, get used to it, kid. No one had warned me, though. But, that was a long time ago. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Dr. Arnn and I are going to talk about Vice President Harris on 60 Minutes, President Trump on my program. It's been a busy week. It's a busy election. And he, of course, is in Michigan, the state that might, in fact, decide it all. And I remind everyone in the New York Times on Monday, there was a headline that Kamala Harris is in trouble in Michigan with the Arab American vote for reasons which remain mysterious to everyone except Donald Trump, who said to me on Monday, they want peace. I will test that proposition with Dr. Arnn when we come back. Don't go anywhere, America. You're listening to Hillsdale Dialogue. Get your Hillsdale application. Don't be deterred by what he just said. You don't need a 3.95, mostly. Just go and get the application and take a swing at it. Hillsdale.edu. You never know.
Do you believe in our founders' vision for America? That our republic will only survive if we are an educated and informed people who know our rights and duties. Since 1844, Hillsdale College has sought to educate all who wish to learn about these timeless principles of self-government. For more than 50 years, the college has worked to spread that mission by sending Imprimis to millions of Americans. Imprimis features some of the best speeches given at Hillsdale events, and now an audio version of the popular Speech Digest is available in a new podcast of the same name. And, like the print publication, Imprimis, the podcast, is always free. Listen to the best arguments from speakers such as Chris Rufo, Molly Hemingway, Mark Stein, and Hillsdale College President Larry Arnn, read by Hillsdale students. Subscribe today to listen to Imprimis at podcast.hillsdale.edu. That's podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you get your audio.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That music means the Hillsdale Dialogue is underway. Once a week we go high, very much the last radio hour of the week. All things Hillsdale, including your application to get admitted, hillsdale.edu. The courses by Mr. Jackson, Professor Jackson, that Dr. Arnn just referenced, are at hillsdale.edu. They're all free. Imprimis is there. It's for free. And, of course, all the Hillsdale Dialogues, some 500 plus, 600 of them, are at hugh4hillsdale.com. Dr. Arnn, the New York Times said on Monday, Harris is in trouble in Michigan with the Arab American vote. And I asked Donald Trump about that on Monday. The headline was Tuesday. I asked him on Monday, and he said, because Arab Americans want peace in the region. So they want me. What do you think?
Yeah, well, America turns on the proposition that the category human is the relevant category in politics. And people want peace. That's true. They make a lot of war, but they want peace. And I very much hope that's true. The Real Clear Politics polling is extremely tight everywhere, including in Michigan. But it's I looked up the same numbers a year ago today, and they're better this time for Trump, if you like Trump. And so, yeah, I think the swing states are all very much in play. And I have a pessimistic friend by nature who favors Trump, and he's become optimistic. And I don't know whether to be afraid about that or happy about it.
Well, we have a mutual friend, Victor Davis Hanson, who has opined on the weekend that the steady erosion of Vice President Harris's support will accelerate into the next 4 weeks. I hope he's right, because I am for Trump. I know you're nonpartisan and the college is, but I'm for Trump. And I hope he's right. Have you talked to VDH about this?
Yeah, I have. And I'm hoping that she will do a lot of media between now and the election, because it's a little hard to follow her sometimes.
Well, let me give you an example of that. This is from 60 Minutes on Monday night. I was watching the Guardians lose in the ninth inning to the Tigers, who I hope you do not support. But then I carried over to Kamala Harris, say this to Bill Whitaker, cut number 7, please.
Groceries are 25% higher, and people are blaming you and Joe Biden for that. Are they wrong?
We now have historic low unemployment in America among all groups of people. We now have an economy that is thriving by all macroeconomic measures. And to your point, prices are still too high. And I know that, and we need to deal with it, which is why part of my plan, you mentioned groceries. Part of my plan is what we must do to bring down the price of groceries.
Now, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you'll see a poker tell. She brushes her hair aside. That's when she's about to tell something that is a lie or about which she's uncomfortable. And she said, my plan will bring down prices. She knows they won't. What did you make of A, the question, and B, the answer, Dr. Arnn?
She's pretty good, you know. I mean, I didn't, once in a while, she says a sentence or a paragraph. That I think if she wrote it down, it would be just one sentence. And you wonder, okay, what does that mean again? This one was relatively clear. Her plan is price caps on groceries. And what's wrong there is that there are laws of economics that are just like the laws of gravity. That is to say, if you regulate the price of a thing, then you will either get too much of it or too little of it, because it is the function of prices to bring supply and demand into conformity. That's what happened, right? So if I raise the tuition at Hillsdale College, it's actually low relative to others. But if I raised it much higher than others, we would get fewer applications. And if I made
as
it free,
the great Milton Friedman
more.
once said, the answer to high prices is high prices. Price controls don't work. I'll be right back with Dr. Arnn because we disagree on the answer there, and I want to go over it with him. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, and I are talking about current events right now. Dr. Arnn's college is nonpartisan, out of the fray. I am a partisan, and I am voting for Trump. And I got to interview the former president on Monday, and on Monday night, Kamala Harris went on 60 Minutes, and now we're looking back at that. Dr. Arnn, you and I disagree about the question and the answer here. I want to play it again for people. Cut number 7, let's play the question.
Groceries are 25% higher, and people are blaming you and Joe Biden for that. Are they wrong?
Okay, stop. That is a fine question. In the business, we call that a billboard because you put the billboard up. Groceries. Fact. They're up 25%. Fact. People are blaming you and Joe Biden. Question. Are they wrong? Here is her answer.
We now have historic low unemployment in America among all groups of people. We now have an economy that is thriving by all macroeconomic measures. And to your point, prices are still too high. And I know that, and we need to deal with it, which is why part of my plan, you mentioned groceries. Part of my plan is what we must do to bring down the price of groceries.
Now, you see, she doesn't answer it first. She says nothing. It's a direct question. Groceries, are they right to blame you? She says we have record low unemployment. And then she brushes her hair and says, part of my plan, you mentioned groceries. He didn't mention groceries. He billboarded groceries. I thought it was the worst part of a terrible interview, but you seem to think it's okay. I guess, are you judging on a curve?
No, I'm going to have to confess to our audience that I don't expect much from her. And so that was a diversion, right? And it was pretty good because here's a fact, unemployment is low. She says all the macroeconomic indicators are thriving. Well, if you include government spending and deficits in that, you would not say that's true. But
oh, your dogs don't like government deficits. They don't like debt.
No, they don't. But it is true. I mean, if you read the guru Brian Westbury, who's your friend and mine,
yes,
he thinks
they like Brian Westbury too.
Times coming, yeah, and so, but right now it's a puzzle that the economy has done rather better so far than he expected, and so she's got that's a real point. That's true. I think what's not true is that incomes have kept up with the rate of inflation.
Correct.
That's not true. Woodrow.
Is Woodrow objecting to the general discussion of economics, which many people do?
He is. He's in my recliner right there, by the way. And, when we get back to Pledge Republic, we'll re-encounter the argument that dogs are philosophic because they know what they love. Woodrow loves my recliner, and he's in it right now.
What's he barking at, though? Is he barking at me?
I don't know.
That's the problem.
If you like dogs, you do have to accept the fact that they're stupid. And Woodrow is, a beautiful dog, but also stupid. It's part of his charm.
Well, let's go back to Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. I wanted to note a contrast because I interviewed the former president on Monday for 27 minutes, a couple dozen questions. Donald Trump always answers the question posed, but then he goes on to a different subject, and sometimes at length.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris never answers the question posed and eventually gets back to it. It makes no sense. They couldn't be more different.
That's right. And so, first of all, I judge it higher than you, as I say, because I don't expect much. That was a diversion, and it would be more artful to do it differently, because if the first thing you say is directly off the point, then people might get a sense that you're avoiding the question, as you do, and you're right to. But, sometimes, she'll say a bunch of stuff, and you go, huh? What did that mean? And that was, clearly a diversion. So I give her a C- on that.
Now, I want to talk to you about the real crisis in the country, which is that we have lost objective reporting of facts in the legacy media. And I mean, this is genuinely a crisis because a democracy depends upon a citizenry that, if it chooses to be informed, can be informed. And I saw this again firsthand on Monday when I interviewed the former president. He made a lot of news. He said, look, if Israel wants to bomb Iran's nuclear sites, we ought to let them. They have a right to revenge. They have a right to retaliate. He made a lot of news, and some moron in an English newspaper wrote that he had actually endorsed eugenics. I want to play for you the 43 seconds on which he based this startling to me assertion, cut number 21.
When you look at the things that she proposes, they're so far off. She has no clue. How about allowing people to come through an open border, 13,000 of which were murderers? Many of them murdered far more than one person, and they're now happily living in the United States. Now a murderer, I believe this, it's in their genes, and we got a lot of bad genes in our country right now. They had 425,000 people come into our country that shouldn't be here, that are criminals. And one of the worst stats, 325,000 young children are missing. Can you imagine?
So that's enough. Out of that response to a question I didn't ask, a reporter said he's embracing Hitlerism and eugenics. Now, Americans have experience with eugenics. Woodrow Wilson was a eugenicist. Margaret Sanger was a eugenicist. There were many people who believed in eugenics. Donald Trump is not one of them. He is saying, he asked me do you believe violence has a genetic component? And I didn't answer. I didn't know. I didn't want to get into it. I subsequently went and looked up from the U.S. courts.gov site, genetic factors in criminal behavior. It turns out there's quite a lot of science that violence may have a genetic component, but it's got nothing to do with race. They just made that up, Larry. They just made that up. How do you deal with a media like this?
Well, first of all, that's a complicated argument, right? Like, apparently it's true. See, what are we doing? We know a lot about DNA now, and there are what they call markers, and I don't know what markers are. I know what DNA looks like because everybody's seen a helix. But these markers can be associated with certain behavior. I'm going to have to expel Woodrow. Woodrow does not like genetics either. Get out of here, Woodrow.
He's left.
He actually did it, but that's because he wanted to go. Is that cause and effect? I would not have said what former President Trump said there, because in the end, by the way, any argument that proves causality in a material condition of a human being is self-defeating, Because if our arguments and actions are caused by the matter in us, then how could we have objective knowledge of that? Would not.
See, I wouldn't have made it either for a much more baser reason, a more prudential one. It is subject to being manipulated as it has been manipulated. You and I might have a conversation about this paper on the, what's the title of it? It's called Genetic Factors in Criminal Behavior from the U.S. Courts in 2000, and volume numbers 64, number 2. And I don't understand genetics, and you don't understand genetics, and I don't understand predispositions and variances and influences, but I'm not going to pick up on something and fact check someone because I don't know, and it turns out that there's a reasonable basis to argue that, but I would not bring it up in the public square. He does not hesitate to do that, Dr. Arnn. It might be one of the reasons.
Imagine yourself grading a paper in which that paragraph appears, what Trump just said. What's the headline? The headline is 15,000, do you say 13,000 murderers have been admitted into America.
Correct.
Right? That's the headline. And illegally admitted. And who knows? One of the reasons it's hard to estimate this election is it's very hard to know who's going to vote and very hard to know who the people are exactly. And if there's not a people who are defined by citizenship, then you cannot have consent of the governed. But here's a universal rule about people. If you set up a class of them and give them accountable power, first they will become corrupt and then they will become wicked. And that's what that is what I fear in America.
And admitting 13,000 murderers. There's so much that is wrong with our immigration policy that we're going to have to come back to it for the final segment. I do think it's going to drive this election in ways that people are actually tell pollsters because they don't want to be accused, as wrongfully as Donald Trump was, of being racist about this. And you can't be, because the people coming over the border are not segregated by race. It's every race is coming over the border. I'll be right back with Dr. Arnn. Don't go anywhere.
Hillsdale College is a small, Christian, classical liberal arts college that operates independently of government funding. And we want you or your son or daughter to apply. At Hillsdale, students grow in heart and mind by studying timeless truths in a supportive community dedicated to the highest things. Hillsdale College costs significantly less than other nationally ranked private liberal arts colleges and receives regular recognition as a best value, and nearly all students receive financial aid. Our robust core curriculum, vibrant student life, and 8-to-1 student-to-faculty ratio make for an education like no other. For more information or to fill out an application, visit hillsdale.edu/info. That's hillsdale.edu/info.
Conclude this week's Hillsdale Dialogue with a point I wanted to make. To argue about the border is not to be a racist, because every kind of race is crossing over the border illegally. Dr. Arnn, what do you make of my proposition?
That's true. And also, by the way, it's not really an argument about how many people we should have.
Correct.
Because, I think it's we should have a lot of people.
And Trump wants to let everyone stay who's done 4 years of college. He said, give them a green card. It's not about the number of people.
That's right. And you want, our friend Senator Cotton and somebody else had a law in the Senate that passed the House, I think, and maybe the Senate, but wasn't, should we do? Draw yourself a picture of somebody who's a productive citizen in a free society. Work, obey the law. Kids are good. Young is good. Tom Cotton told me once, my law, you couldn't get in. I said, doesn't matter. I'm already in.
Yeah.
But in other words, what are the characteristics that make a good citizen in a free republic? Those are not really even controversial. And I mean, they are with some crazy people. But the point is, just pass an immigration law that they get in. And you'll end up having a participatory, open, wide, hotly argued free republic, and people will work a lot and produce a lot and take care of themselves, which is ultimately the object of a free republic. And so what the border thing is about is that we're not following any criteria like that. And there might even be what's called counter selection. That's a term in banking, I think. That is to say, we may be favoring lawbreakers, because it is against the law to come across the border illegally. So the point is, there's counter selection. And then one can connect that to the fear that elections are tight in America, and maybe this is happening to affect that, which means that there's not a people who can control their government. The government is now selecting.
I want to argue that it is beyond argument that it is affecting our election, and I do not believe that you have to prove election fraud to do that. It is simply the overwhelming of public services that are otherwise not provided that impacts the body politic and makes it angrier and less stable. And we are not talking about what to do about Iran and Israel. We are talking about a broken border that in the Constitution is uniquely vested in the executive branch to enforce. It's not a racial argument at all. It's not an argument about numbers or quality or the program. It's an argument about abdication, and they've abdicated.
I agree. I agree with you that immigration is the single most important issue as we define issues today in this election. But that's because it is the most prominent and urgent symbol of the larger problem. And this problem, I think, has been dominating American politics for much of my adult life. And that is the government so large and remote that we can't control it anymore? And look, the numbers are shocking. I looked them up the other day. I used to write about this back when you and I were making trouble for regulatory agencies in California.
Oh, those were
in 19. Wasn't that fun?
Yeah.
Hugh Hewitt, I can tell people, is tough. I mean, but you can tell it better back then than you can now.
I want to interject briefly. When Kamala Harris says she's going to build 3 million houses, you and I were both in California representing home builders at that time or arguing on their behalf. That's the most ludicrous claim I've heard in this election. Government never builds houses. All they do is prevent houses from being built. Please continue.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, it's like a certain Republican former president was always saying, I'm going to teach every child in Texas to read. And I heard him give a speech like that while he was still governor of Texas. And somebody said, do you think that's a good idea? And I said, I bet a lot of money he's never taught a single child to read and never will. Yeah. I have not. I read to my kids, but they learn to read, right?
They do.
So, yeah, back to the point. This kind of government became institutionalized. It became the majority in the election of 1932. So go back to 1930 and compare numbers. Back then, government total, state, local, federal, was 12% of the economy. Now it's 50%, a little more, actually. And back then, over 60% of the money that was raised and spent in government was raised and spent in cities and counties and towns. That means there wasn't that much government, and what there was mostly close to the people. Now that number is under 20%. The federal government was under 25% in 1930. Now it's north of 60%. So we've moved a massive, we've moved, 30, 20, it's an increase of 2/3.
And that is on the ballot. That music means we're done. We're going to go back to Plato next week. But that is on the ballot. Do we wish to be...
In every issue.
Yep. Do we wish to be governed that way? I do not. I wish to be free. And we'll see if a majority of Americans, a constitutional majority at least, agree with Dr. Arnn and me. Talk to you next week. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Harley. Thank you, Dr. Arnn. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu.
Thanks for listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. For more information about Hillsdale College, head to hillsdale.edu.